From the mysteries of the universe to the mysteries of the unknown, this is Mysterious Realms with Mr. Cyber. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Here is your host, Mr. Cyber.
Well, hello. This is Elijah, aka Mr. Cyber, and welcome to Mysterious Realms. Today, our show goes over everything universe. Oh, I love this discussion and this topic. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Mark Fiorentino, who shares his views on how the universe really works based on his study and research of Einstein's Unified Field Theory. Mark will discuss how the application of Einstein's theory can be used to travel through space, renewable energy, and future technology. He will also talk about the connection to conspiracy theories, including UFOs and alien technology they use, as well as other controversial topics such as near-death experience revelations that are linked to the theory of super relativity. So Mark, you can check all his info out in the description below, including his book, Master of Reality. So this should be a very, very interesting discussion. So it was my honor to have Mark Fiorentino. Well, hello, Mark. Thank you for joining me today. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And I know I was looking at your background, and these topics and the items that you do research on are so fascinating. And I can tell you this, our audience is going to love this because you cover a lot of ground. And I know we only got a limited time today, so we're going to try to get to what we can. But here's a question I never asked a guest. What topic would you like to discuss first? Or what's the first question you would like me to ask you?
Oh gosh, that varies with my mood, but I'm certainly open for discussions on the cause of gravity, and there's many cosmology issues that I bring up in the book. The deformation of stars. We could start with that and just kind of ease into the deeper questions of gravity and so forth.
Yeah, go at it. That works.
Yeah. So in my book, I dedicated like 3 chapters to the cosmology theory of super relativity. And it really started with my investigation of the very small, which was really the neutron. And it's important to realize that my theory is an intelligent design theory. That means, of course, that I believe that God created this universe, what we call God. I mean, aliens call God, has a different name. There's many different names even on Earth for God, but it's the universal creator. And so when you look at and you're doing scientific research with that thought in mind, it brings up questions about things that you would normally never ask. And there was things about the neutron that made me curious. And it behaves differently than the proton, whereas the proton is a very stable particle. It can go billions of years without decaying. Some people think it doesn't decay at all ever. And that works perfectly because the proton needs to last, because the proton and electron makes hydrogen, and we need hydrogen to make stars. So that all makes sense. But now what's interesting, the other particle that makes up all the matter in the universe is the neutron. And it it behaves strangely. And since I thought about it, and I said, well, wait a minute, the designer designed this strange behavior into it. So I started lurking around, researching, trying to figure out why the neutron acts so differently. And what I'm talking about is if you isolate the neutron by itself in outer space or whatever, in 15 minutes, it decays. So it's like not stable in that situation. But in other situations, the neutron is very stable, lasts for billions of years, like when it's mixed with protons and so forth and different elements. Then it doesn't decay. So I says, why did the Creator do that? Especially, why does it decay in 15 minutes? That's an intentional design. So when you look at it that way, you're looking for something that makes sense. So I looked at what happens to the neutron when it does decay. It turns into a proton and an electron. And that was a huge clue, because a proton and an electron are hydrogen. So that means, to me, that the neutron, at the beginning of the universe, there was most likely a lot of neutrons, because we needed to have hydrogen in order to form the universe. So I began looking at black holes and stars. When they die, what happens? And I found that the neutron stars seem to appear after a star blows off its atmosphere. Now, the current theory is that the neutron stars are created during that explosion. Usually explosions don't really create matter, but I thought, what if the neutron star was already there? And the neutron star, or what I call neutron spheres or seeds, came from the Big Bang, which means the Big Bang, the cosmic egg, was made of neutronium. So now I've got a whole theory brewing in that the neutron needs to behave this way, because a neutral particle can be packed really tight, close together, because it doesn't have a repulsive charge like the proton. So it really doesn't make sense to have proton stars, because the repulsive force is many, many orders of magnitude greater than the force of gravity. So then another question came into my mind. Wait a minute. People are saying, the scientists are saying that stars just form, there's a big hydrogen cloud, and then it just starts to condense magically. And it doesn't make sense. The explanation does not make any sense at all. So I says, wait a minute. We need a gravitational origin of some sort, some gravity crushing device to draw in the hydrogen in the first place to form a star. So now, I'm linking all these things that neutrons can do. It can create neutronium. We know they're neutron stars. When they blow up, we know what's left over is a pulsar or a neutron star. So we know that more than likely, according to the theory of super relativity, all stars have neutronium cores. That's a big discovery. That's a major discovery. So then I went and I looked for proof or evidence that there's something solid inside of the sun. So I found this NASA chart, and I guess they did this. It's called a tachyline chart, in which they're using radar or whatever. I think it's radar, to scan the gases to see how they're moving, the hydrogen gas around the star. And as it penetrates more and more, the gases begin to move more like a solid. And when you get to around 50% or so, it dropped, the lines crushed together, and it's indicating there's a solid in there. I mean, a rock solid, something inside of the sun. So there is evidence supporting the idea that there's something solid in there, and it makes sense. All stars must have neutronium cores to gather the gas, and since that neutronium is spinning rapidly, it keeps the gases from really falling right to the surface and spiraling around there. It creates tremendous pressure, and a fusion process starts. I've designed a system that really I didn't design it. It's the design of the creator, who came up with a system to create stars. And so my cosmology theory really comes up with a sensible Big Bang in which enormous amounts of neutron gas were released from the neutronium core, and the cosmic age was a huge black hole, according to my theory, that was hundreds and hundreds and thousands of light years across. All the matter and all the energy came from there in the form of neutronium. It released and then there was much neutron gas, along with many spheres, or the neutronium didn't all vaporize with the Big Bang. So the spheres went out with gathering the gas as they went, and within 15 minutes, the universe has all the hydrogen it needs to make millions upon millions of galaxies, stars, and galaxies. Everything fits together, and it all comes about because of the theory I have concerning the neutrons. So that's an interesting kind of, it's in the rear of my book, but it's fascinating to me because it's big news, it's important news, and it's something that we could verify if scientists would put more effort into trying to confirm that there is something solid within the sun. And if so, then it's probably neutronium rapidly spinning, and all the other stars probably have the same thing. So that's a major change in the cosmology theory, which they're completely unaware of at this point, and I would like astronomers to become aware of this idea. I know it's radical, and it might be hard for them to accept initially, but I think if somebody started to look into it, they're going to see that every star out there has got a neutronium core, as well as probably every planet, and that's very radical. I believe the Earth does have a neutronium core as well, a rapidly spinning one, very small size compared to the size of the sun. And so...
Well, you know what? I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's just really fascinating. And you're the first person you're the first one I've heard who's put it that way, and that actually makes sense. And that's very fascinating. Yeah. That's a very fascinating point. And going across the whole board, like, let's go to neutron stars for a minute. That's always fascinated me. Absolutely. That and pulsars have always fascinated me, but neutrons, because I saw a video on YouTube quite a while back, and it showed the density of, like, if you were to have a single neutron in your finger, well, if you could hold it, let's say, and you dropped it, it would fall right through the Earth. And neutron stars is like usually one step before a black hole.
Right.
And just the amount of gravity that thing produces. And then when you look at the sun and the Earth, I've seen pictures where they try to guesstimate what the core of the Earth looks like. And it's always hard for me to believe that the core is actually like that. And it's actually more like what you just mentioned, including with our sun. So that's a very fascinating topic. I'm kind of just trying to put the dots together, Mark, because this is such a big topic and you really got to wrap your head around it. So I tell people, go back and listen to that part again.
Yeah, there's other people that have claimed they're talking to aliens through different methods, hypnosis or whatever. Now those aliens are the people that they're talking to that claim that they're aliens, ETs, are claiming that there's a sun source inside of the Earth. Now that to me makes perfect sense, because it's what's happening, if I'm correct. What's happening is there's a fusion process happening inside of every planetary core. Because how did that planet start? It was probably a smaller group of gas, gaseous clouds, still massive, but smaller, that these smaller neutronium spheres gathered while they were going around the sun. So the sun was forming and it had gotten, most of the gas, but the planets like Jupiter is a huge gaseous ball.
Oh, yeah.
So something gathered that gas as well. Something, a huge gravitational source of gas just doesn't come and squish itself together. Its repulsive forces are too great. You need a gravitational origin to do that. And so there's every indication in my mind that every planet starts off as some sort of like a brown star, they call it.
Yeah,
there's another name for it.
Is it a brown dwarf? Is it a brown dwarf?
Yeah, brown dwarfs.
Okay.
And what they do is they gather the gas and they start making the elements. They make, first it's hydrogen, then it's helium, then it's carbon, oxygen, and pretty soon the outer layer cools, and it becomes a crust. And this process continues for billions of years until you have a planet. And if you think about it, hey, I'm standing in the ocean looking around. I'm saying, where did all this water come from? And I think, the current theory is, we had a lot of, what do they call them? Comets come down and bring the water. And I just, not seeing that happen all that often. I'm thinking, and there's a lot of water in these oceans, I think that water was made right here. And, first we had the hydrogen gas, and then we finally got up in the process. The fusion was creating oxygen, and eventually it ignited, and it rained, and it came down, and it formed lots of water, helped cool the planet. And we have on this planet every element that there is. How did all these elements manage to get here on this planet? I'm thinking they were made here. And to further prove that there's a nuclear process going on within the Earth, I said, well, wait a minute. If there's a fusion process going on in the middle of the Earth, then we'll see neutrinos coming out of the center of the Earth.
Yeah.
So I started doing research, looking for, this is the power of the internet. You couldn't do this 100 years ago. You have to go to the library, look for books. You'd be lucky if you found something like this. But I go on the internet, I find a guy that is doing research in Japan, and sure enough, he's turned his neutrino detector toward the center of the Earth, and there's neutrinos coming out of the center of the Earth. So either there's a fusion or a fission process or both going on in the center of the Earth. So there is indication something very powerful is going on. And so the evidence mounts. Would that scientist believe that there's a neutronium core? No. But my belief is that's exactly what's going on. And unfortunately, I don't know of any way to drill down through all the magma and everything to see that, to prove it for sure. All we could do is we have seismic activity and we can measure the waves out of there. And sure enough, there is something solid indicated by the seismic or transverse waves that are coming through the Earth and coming to the surface. There's an indication. There's maybe there's definitely a molten section, which is happening because of the fusion process that keeps the Earth hot. That's why it hasn't cooled off all these years.
Yeah.
So, it's a fascinating topic, and I continue to research it. And I thought that might be a good thing to start off the show with. We'll get into that, get people thinking about that, doing their own research. Maybe some astronomers will think about that and be inspired to do some research.
Wow. You know what? Thank you for starting the show with that topic, because that is, even I'm going to have to go back and listen to that, Mark, just to wrap my head around that. But everything you said.
I try to compress it. Yeah. I try to compress everything. There's, it's 3 chapters in the book. I go into a lot of detail, but there's more evidence. There's so much more. There's so much more to talk about with cosmology theory. And,
I think that's great.
I just scratched the surface.
Well, if I could go to another topic really fast. I just want to start off, we can't start off anymore, but I want to go to the question. When you were younger, what got you interested in Albert Einstein? What fascinated you about him?
Well, yeah, it started with, I was going to church and catechism, and while I was going there, the nun who was teaching the class said to go home and look up and find a saint born on your birthday and report on that. So I went home and I talked to my parents. They weren't aware of anybody that was born on March 14th. So I do remember going over to the calendar, which was hanging in the kitchen, and I looked at it. It's funny how I have such a clear memory of such a trivial thing, but I look at it and I see Albert Einstein's name on March 14th.
Yeah.
So I just went to the encyclopedia, not knowing really at the time who that was, and I just went in there and I opened up the encyclopedia and started reading about Albert Einstein. I found him to be a fascinating person, which eventually led me into the reading about the unified field theory, which was also talked about in that version of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And that I thought was just the best idea that I have ever heard. And that kicked off a great interest in science for me. Science, and of course Albert Einstein has been my hero for many, many years, and I read everything I can about him and watch documentaries, and I just enjoy his life story and his work on the unified field theory and general relativity and special relativity. Fascinating.
Well, you know what?
Being. So
I know with the special theory of relativity and the other ones, can you explain to our audience, because I always get these mixed up, can you explain exactly what the unified field theory is in a kind of simplified term, if you can? If not, just you can explain it whatever's comfortable for you.
There's a long, difficult way, and everybody will get confused, but it's really not that hard. There's a very simple explanation, and basically it's this. The unified field theory is really about Einstein's quest for uniting electromagnetism to gravity. So in his mind, electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So that's it. So, people might think, well, what do you mean fundamental field? Well, back in the day, everybody had the idea, and this is back in James Clerk Maxwell's time and even in Newton's time, that there was an ether, a substance, something that space was made of. And that's the single fundamental field. So then electromagnetism, which is really a combination of two fields at once, and I go in my theory and I actually deconstruct electromagnetism to say that there's really only three primary forces, and forces are fields. So there's three primary force fields that exist. The electrostatic field, it's a twist of space. The magnetic field is a rotation of space. Whenever the electrostatic charge moves, it's spinning and it's a twist. So basically, the space around that charge rotates in reaction to the charge as it passes by. That's the magnetic field. So the magnetic field doesn't exist until the charge moves. So now we have electromagnetism. That's what they call electromagnetism. And then there's all that was left to do is figure out a way that electromagnetism, or charge moving, causes gravity. And that's what I did in my book. I found the mechanism, the mechanical method for electromagnetic charges to move to cause gravity. So that's all the unified field theory is. Electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. And that's all there is to it. Then it's the process is just trying to figure out what the mechanism was, and that's what's explained very thoroughly in my book.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. That's pretty cool. So here's something I've heard. So right now, going to E equals mc squared, okay, which is energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. They always talk about the theory of everything. Like there's something, we haven't found it yet, but a formula about as long as that, E equals mc squared, that will encompass everything. Do you think we're going to eventually find that or discover what that formula is?
Book.
Oh, it is.
Yes, it's in my book. The answer is yes, and I'm writing a technical paper right now so that I can upload It's going to be 50 to 60 pages long, but I have the formula. I worked it out. I had a physicist train me on what he did was explain the mechanics of this equation. And so I wanted to make sure that it matched the model in my head. And when I say mechanics, I mean what is actually happening in space and with particles as they move, that interaction. That's what this formula describes. And if you want to have the theory of everything, then you have to solve the unified field theory. So I went about that task through the course of my lifetime. And so I will give you what the equation says in words.
Okay.
Not the equation, because you're probably not going to get that right off the bat. But
Correct.
I have to start with the mechanical explanation. So the super relativity gravity explanation, which is basically the theory of everything because it's the unification of gravity to electromagnetism, goes like this. Gravity is caused by the accelerated motion of fundamental unbalanced charges. When charges move in this way, they cause the space in and around the particle to contract. Gravity is a contraction of the spatial medium. So I put those words into an equation. An equation, by the way, that it's been known for 2.5, maybe 250 to 300 and something years. And it's been sitting there as it's taught in, basic classical physics classes all the time. It's called the Moment of Inertia.
Yeah.
It was just a little bit of manipulation that needed to be done, and you needed to solve. It's a system of equations, but that one little 1-inch equation, when you transform it to solve for mass, it models exactly what I'm saying. Basically, is that gravity comes about as a result of charges which are unbalanced, like either too much positive or too much negative, are moving in an accelerated form. And in that accelerated form is a circular form. Uniform circular motion is accelerated. Now, why is that so important? Because now I'm going to link the importance of acceleration to gravity. Einstein said there was an equivalence principle, and he said somehow gravity equals acceleration. And when I read about that many years ago, I said, well, that's great, but there's no explanation. Mm-hmm. There's no mechanical explanation for why that would be. In my book, I provide that. I just told you. The mechanical explanation is that particles move in this way. They cause space to contract, and gravity is a contraction of space. So that's really how, and to further back it up, I mean, I get the idea to do this, what I just said, told you, from Einstein himself. I followed his path, and it was the right path. The problem today, and why physicists haven't solved this problem before, is they have the wrong model, and they don't know it, and they keep trying to prove the wrong model, which is basically a model of saying gravity comes about as a particle-to-particle interaction. That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, that doesn't.
No. It's like two players. If you're throwing a ball back and forth between them, you're not going to be attracted by that. You're going to be repelled, if anything. But, they have some sort of idea that somehow there's particles out there that glom on to all the other particles in different ways, which is unexplained, and slow them down and give them inertia and all this stuff, when really it's all about a particle-to-space interaction. But they don't even believe that space is a real thing anymore. So their model is so twisted and broken, there's no chance that they can solve the problem. And that's why they haven't. But they're all smarter than me. But I stuck with Einstein. I followed his path. And let me tell you what he says about this. The reasoning that I got to form my theory. What he did, it actually comes from Paul Ehrenfest. the Ehrenfest paradox, which is the same thing as what I'm saying is Einstein's happiest thought. And here it is. Einstein followed the line of reasoning that began with his happiest thought of his life. Still at the Swiss Patent Office, he conducted one of his famous thought experiments. Einstein imagined a circle spinning in space. The center of the circle did not move, but its circumference was moving quickly in a circular direction. Einstein compared what happens in several reference frames, a standard tool that he had used in developing the special relativity theory. And I underlined this in my notes. He concluded, using his special relativity, that the boundary of the disk contracted as it spun. There was a force acting on the circle at the boundary, the centrifugal force, and its action was analogous to that of the gravitational force. But that same contraction that affected the outer circle left the diameter unchanged. Thus, Einstein concluded in a way that surprised even him. The ratio of the circle to the diameter was no longer pi. He deduced, in the presence of a gravitational force or field, the geometry of space was non-Euclidean. What that means is it's bent, and the special bending is a contraction. He said it himself. I searched for years for him to say contraction and gravity in the same paragraph, and I finally found it on this particular book. It's critical to understand that when he came up with this idea, which really I think he read it, and because Ehrenfest and Max Born kind of had this idea coming from special relativity first, and he read it, and then he started writing papers about this, the spinning cylinder or the spinning disk. But what is important to realize, that's the mechanical method that particles can use to contract space. And a spatial contraction is the gravitational force. So now we have a mechanical method that we can use to draw space together and give it this deformation that we call gravity, the field of force. It's basically a specific stress or tension within the medium, which is the ether or space itself. So it's critical. It's
Gotcha.
critical. I had to link all that together to get the theory of which I call the signature of God,
mm-hmm.
which is another chapter in the book, which comes from an NDE person who I decided to look for because, again, Einstein inspired me to try and read the. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay, Mark. You're good.
I killed that phone.
Hey,
anyway.
It's Wednesday, man. It's not Saturday, so it's understood.
Spam list. And in the book, I go into that whole discovery of the signature of God, which is the dynamical geometry that Einstein was looking for, and that explains this mechanical explanation that I just made here for you. So,
but you know what's fascinating?
Going on.
Oh, I don't mean to cut you off, Mark. Right. What's fascinating with what you said, and I'm actually glad you said it. I've heard quite a few scientists and researchers say the problem. So going back to the theory of everything, a lot of them said the problem is a lot of these individuals have veered off course from what Einstein was researching and doing his studies on, and no one really has just maintained the focus that he had on his specific research, because they always veer off course, which makes sense. But they said to really get to that, you have to just focus on what Einstein did and continue with his research without veering off course. And that's what sounds like you've done, which I really like, because you stayed your course to do your research. And I find that very fascinating.
I stayed the course because I believe it was the truth. He was on the right path. And that's because I read about quantum mechanics a lot. And, I tried to give it a chance. I tried to see why so many scientists embraced it so dearly. But in the end, that model never made sense. And they will, many of them will freely admit that it doesn't make sense. Like, let's say Lisa Molan once said, this is a quote actually from Richard Feynman. He said approximately this is Richard Feynman talking. If all your colleagues have tried to demonstrate that something's true and failed, it might be because that thing is not true. Basically, that's what I'm saying about quantum mechanics, especially string theory, which is taking them even a level deeper into the rabbit hole, which is burning all our best resources, intellectually speaking, in a theory that's never going to be provable because it's just not right.
Well, yeah, I've heard a lot about string theory, and it's so confusing. And even the individuals who were researching this, coming up with that theory, even sound confused. It's like, it's just a guess. It's not. There's really no. They try to put the science behind it, but it's just not there. So they have to essentially say, okay, this is a possibility, but that's nothing, a possibility. Darn, man, I could make something up and that could be a possibility. Right. It doesn't mean.
Yes, it's true. And string theory has been going on for 40 to 50 years without any definitive progress. Yeah. It's not even testable.
It's not testable. And isn't science about testing and finding, based evidence-based or science-based? And yet they have nothing to really back it up at all.
Well, it's composed of basically 11 dimensions, all of which are spun into sizes so small you can never see or detect.
I know.
So we don't really know that they're there. And the 11 dimension trick is what makes it possible to have any sort of a unified field theory if you're using quantum mechanics that makes the math work out where you eliminate infinities, which has always been a problem with the mathematics of the past where quantum mechanics is concerned. And they do a lot of things, tricks to get equations to work, like renormalization and such, that, get rid of the affinities or ignore them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of, the extreme weakness of quantum gravitational effects now poses some philosophical problems. Maybe nature is trying to tell us something new here. Maybe we should not try to quantize gravity. That's Richard Feynman quote. He kind of knew deep down, he didn't want to jump away, but, the fact that they tried like 26 times to quantize gravity and failed every time, but still continue to try, concerns me greatly.
Yeah.
It's time to move on from that. And the only way we're going to do this is they're going to have to, at some point I'm going to have to get the attention of physicists and say, look at this math, look at this formula, look at this idea, this model, and this is it. This is what you've been waiting for, and they're just going to have to be open-minded enough. Hopefully, enough of them will be open-minded enough to accept it and give it a chance. Because I've got the math. I've solved the math for the neutrino, not the neutrino, for the neutron and the proton. I've made it where you can compute those, and that's not really been done before. And it's so simple, it's almost embarrassing. But, and that's probably why I could do it, because I'm nowhere near as smart as these physicists. These guys are world-class intellectual geniuses. I've only got one real gift, because I question myself, how did you figure all of this stuff out? And I looked at what I said in my book, and I kept bringing up, I saw patterns. I see patterns. And so I said to myself, well, maybe you should test yourself. So I investigated myself, basically. I researched myself, and I went on the internet. I said, all right, you think you're good at solving patterns? Let's go take a Rorschach test or some sort of an aptitude test for pattern recognition. And I did, and got in my easy chair and took a test, and I scored around 141. That's considering I fell asleep twice during the test. I know hopefully the timing didn't lower my score some. But, I was tired that day and I was relaxed and I'm taking the test. But sure enough, I was able to determine that I'm pretty good at pattern recognition.
Yeah.
So, at least for myself, I have some sort of reassurance that, well, okay, you got a legitimate shot here. And there was other things that happened in my life, but
that is awesome.
These are questions. You got to be willing to question everything in this game, this particular game we're in, and certainly I did that, and including questioning myself.
Well, you know what? I've heard a lot of individuals say too, and I'm glad you said that as well, because a lot of these top scientists or researchers mentioned that when a lot of these researchers do their research, they always tend to try to stay on the path because it's the normal thing to do. But the problem with that is you're not thinking outside the box. And once you start thinking outside the box, kind of like how Einstein did in a way, and these other individuals like Tesla, that's when they started just, doing these discoveries and finding the stuff. If they were to stay on the path, they wouldn't have probably found what they did or discovered what they had. So going off course is very important. I mean, you have to essentially be an open book. You really do. And it's like that with everything. And I don't know why science is very on that narrow path without trying to think outside.
I can agree with you and say this. It is a tragic occurrence that scientists can be blinded by their own presuppositions. Basically, that is, I think, is the core reason that things are the way they are today. They have been seduced by the quantum mechanics paradigm, and they have all these presuppositions that it's this way and this is that way, and let's not question that. And I could give you examples in physics where they just will not allow a discovery to be credited and acknowledged, like the speed of light is slowing down.
Yeah,
they resist that idea. And there's a guy, Barry Setterfield, who did a lot of good work and wrote a great paper. It was not refuted ever. That said, hey, I've checked the past. Since 1729, the first time that speed of light was measured, all the way up till today, and my indications, the data that I collected, say the speed of light is slowing down. And let me tell you, that guy met with heavy resistance, because that really makes science look bad, because science they're saying, hey, Einstein said speed of light is constant, and we're all standing by that, and it's not good science if you go otherwise to that. So it's just the way science works. Maybe it's always been that way. There's always this thing that you got to break through the authoritative figures, the people in authority. You've got to, sway them somehow to break away from their current beliefs. And it's probably true. It's probably always been that way. And we're just locked into a different paradigm that's really taking physics in the direction that's not productive.
Yeah. So here's something, Mark. So going to the speed of light. This has always intrigued me, because a lot of people think, oh, you can't go faster than the speed of light. But what they don't take into account is the bending of space-time.
Right.
So that's a question for you. How do both of those work with each other? So we can't go faster than light, but you can change things without breaking the law of physics. Is that correct? And I'm bringing this up by like how UFOs travel, warp speeds, etc.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, we have to realize that we can break the speed of light. If we couldn't do that, then we're doomed to stay on this planet, and all the other aliens would be doomed to stay where they're at, because if you can only go to the speed of light, then it's going to take enormous amounts of time. You know, I'm assuming that most species don't have a lifetime that's much longer than ours, maybe double or triple. Still, that's not good enough. If it takes 4.2 years traveling at the speed of light to get to Proxima Centauri, that's not practical. That's intolerable. 4.2 to get there to see if there's anything there, another 4.2 to get back. So the Earth people will be waiting 8.4 years for you to travel all this way, and not to mention all of the problems with accelerating to the speed of light that are preventing you to go beyond it. Something has to change. Something in the method of motion of particles or a massive object has to change. And the only thing that we can change here is space itself. We have to bias it. So the secret to going beyond the speed of light is creating a spatial bias drive, which means somehow you're going to put out a force field, like in Star Trek they call it the warp field, and it's very close to that. The terminology kind of really does fit. You have to create a warp field, or in my terminology, you create something that I call the slip wave, and your spaceship is surrounded by this. So, and all it is an incredibly intense magnetic field. And if you want to create propulsion, now if you just do an incredibly intense magnetic field and you surround it with a UFO, it'll hover. If it's a symmetrical field, the entire craft will become weightless as long as this magnetic field is around the ship. And we know from many times that physicists have spotted UFOs, and they made some observations that were critical. Like one example is that there's this physicist looking at it, and he had polarized lenses on. He could see that the light was polarized. That only happens when you have an intense magnetic field. It will polarize the light. There was another physicist that analyzed a UFO over Belgium, a Belgian Triangle UFO, and the person took a picture, and he was within a few hundred yards of this thing. And when the physicists analyzed the film, this is old, 1980s, before digital cameras, they analyzed the film. The emulsion was magnetized. More evidence that UFOs emit strong magnetic fields. And then Project Blue Book, when they sent out the people to investigate the sites, sometimes they bring magnometers. Well, what does the U.S. Air Force know about UFOs that they knew to bring a magnometer, which is a device that measures magnetic fields? There's so much evidence saying that UFOs use high magnetics, and they use it in a way that not only cancels gravity, but creates propulsion, and they must be exceeding the speed of light, not just by 8 times like Star Trek says, but tens of thousands of times. So the truth is, according to the theory of super relativity, using the slip wave, which is basically a gradient magnetic field, which means at the beginning of the ship you have a strong field. The next layer of magnetic fields is stronger, and the next layer, let's say you have a cigar-shaped craft, is stronger. Then at the rear of the ship, you have an immensely strong gravitational field. That creates a magnetic field gradient, which creates a pressure wave within that field. And that pressure wave is what causes, that pressure field is what causes the motion, the velocity of the craft. And since you're using a magnetic field, you're biasing space, and you're doing something that we've known for years is what causes the speed of light to be what it is. And it was discovered by James Clerk Maxwell. C, the speed of light, is equal to 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. Permittivity and permeability are properties of space, which means space is a real thing. So if we put an incredibly intense magnetic field around a UFO or whatever, not only do we get the benefits of gravity and propulsion, but we cancel inertia inside of that area where the people are inside of the craft, and we reduce permittivity and permeability. And if you do that in the equation, you'll see the speed of light goes up higher and higher. The less permittivity and the less permeability you have, the greater you can go. That means you can break this light speed barrier as long as you can reduce those two numbers. And you do that by stretching space, which makes it thinner and more rarefied. I'm talking about the ether now, which is a real substance, which we have to, again, come back and realize does exist.
Yeah.
So that's how you break the light speed barrier. It can be done. It has to be done. Otherwise, we're all locked on our planets and we'll never be able to explore the universe. And clearly, with all the people out there that have seen UFOs, including myself,
yeah,
they're ships from other worlds, and they're not just, they're not using rockets, they're not using jets. Forget about it. You'll never get anywhere using those.
Oh, of course you won't. No, you won't even. You will get nowhere, Mark.
That's like crude space travel mechanism. That's like you barely qualify as an intelligent being using that kind of technology. The real masters of the universe, they have mastered field theory, they have mastered the unified field theory, and they have mastered anti-gravity and how to break the light speed barrier.
Yeah.
And this is the primary way of doing it. You use high magnetics. And that's how you break the light speed barrier. It can be done, and I describe it in detail in my book.
Oh, well, you know what? It can be done, and what's great about that is it's proven, even though it might be hidden right now by governments. I'm pretty sure they're hiding a lot of this stuff, but the science backs it up, Mark. Just like what you're saying, it's all there. The science backs it up.
Does. That's why I quoted Maxwell's equation. Because he basically, that equation Maxwell was a guy who believed strongly in the ether. He developed his equations, which are, world famous, true and equations that are rock solid, that are still taught in school and are correct within their context. And he got it using an ether theory. Einstein believed in ether. Lorentz believed in the ether. Newton believed in the ether.
Yeah, I know.
These guys are no just ordinary schmoes. These are the best that we ever turned out. They're the A-team. And I'm sticking with those guys. They were right. And what we got today is wrong. They don't believe in the ether anymore, primarily due to one experiment that misguided and misinterpreted, totally steered everybody into the wrong direction. And I talk about that in great detail in my book, because I want people to understand that misinterpretation of the Michelson-Morley experiment was a critical error in history that needs to be rectified. And it's a tragic thing, but that, and along with quantum mechanics, has got us working in the wrong areas, and areas that won't be productive, it won't be helpful to building, interstellar spaceships, which we need to be doing. Our society, our culture, our world, our species needs to be able to go to other planets and colonize so that we can perpetuate ourselves when this planet becomes uninhabitable, which it will happen someday. We just don't know when.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That goes back to, I listened to he's a theoretical physicist, okay? I don't agree with him on everything, but his name is Michio Kaku, but he mentioned about these different types of civilizations, type 1. I don't know if it's type 0, but like 0, 1, 2, and 3. And depending on which type you're in, it's like, I think we're going on type 1 or type 2, but we're like a century away from it.
Yeah, we're low right now.
Yeah, we're really low. And I think type 3 is like where you can manipulate whatever you want, or not manipulate, but work within the laws of physics as much as you want. We can control stars, etc. And I just think this is completely fascinating. I know next month, and I'm always iffy about this because the last interview I did with a gentleman, and we were talking about the whole alien UFO cover-up, and UFOs. And I know President Trump signed part of the COVID bill last year to release the classified documents, which are coming next month. But I'm always questioning this, Mark. The people that are covering this up are the same folks that are going to be releasing it. I mean, to me, this is just a cat and, chasing the dog's tail. I mean, I think we're just going to get the same stuff we've always been told. Because I know the Pentagon a few weeks ago said, yeah, these things are real, but they were talking about a naval video of this UFO.
Right.
And UFO means anything. But that kind of beats around the bush a little bit. That doesn't give us everything. But the point I'm trying to... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, no, you're on the right track. You're saying the right stuff. And why are they doing it? Is that what you're getting toward?
Well, that plus I was getting to... So all these years and decades, the government's been covering it up. But with our generations now and cell phones, our generations now are very vocal, if you haven't noticed by the news. If they see something, whatever it is, they tend to talk about it, and they don't stop. To me, this is a pro and con, but when it comes to UFOs or aliens, it's a pro, because while this may have been hidden within the government's radar for such a long time, I think the ones that are going to be revealing it will eventually be the public. Because the government can only hide so much. But what's your overall take on that? The whole government hiding?
Well, first of all, the government is hiding it for a very good and simple reason. The people who have anti-gravity technology and faster-than-light technology, have UFO technology basically, have a strategic military advantage over everybody else. And as long as they keep it secret, nobody knows that we got it, we have this advantage. If there was ever to be some sort of an attack or whatever, we would have a set of weapons and weapon transports or whatever that could far exceed anybody that would be attacking us. And so it's best to just keep it secret. It's the ace in the hole.
Which makes sense to an extent. I mean, that absolutely makes sense.
It makes sense. I don't really get mad about it or anything. It really does make sense to do that. And, I'm not being critical of the government for doing that.
Yeah.
But at some point, you have to realize there's a bigger picture. It's not just worrying about Russians or the Chinese or whatever. The problem is that we may have some sort of natural disaster that we cannot prevent. Now, I address some of the ones we can prevent. If we have the UFO technology, we can deflect meteors and asteroids from coming in and save the planet. And we really can't do that with rocket technology. But we can with the drones, and I talk about it in our book, how you do it, how you deflect these things away from the Earth. So if we were to start building these drones and these UFO supercars and all this stuff, we'd have that technology. If something else were to happen, let's say the Earth's core became unstable, and there's good reason to believe that it might be a bit unstable, because we certainly seem to have a lot of plate tectonics going on and a lot of volcanoes, certainly more than the other planets that are nearby us. So we may have a situation where our only choice is to leave or perish. Supposing the sun runs out of hydrogen fuel, supposing our estimates of how much hydrogen the sun has to burn is off. And there's a good chance it's going to be off by 10 or 20%.
Yeah.
If my neutronium core theory is right, that means a lot of that mass is locked in neutronium at the core, and there's a lot less hydrogen fuel than we thought.
Correct.
And the sun could start to turn into a red giant a lot sooner, maybe a billion years earlier. We may still have 2 or 3 billion years, but who knows? Because we don't know how big that solid neutronium core is inside of the sun.
That's absolutely right. And what gets me is we think we know how big the core is in the Earth, and we live on the Earth. How are we supposed to know the core of the sun? It's all going back to guesstimates, just like string theory, at least to me. It's a guess. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. And I think you're spot on.
We don't know, and I don't know there's a way to penetrate into there and see. I can maybe think of one way. It would be one hell of an experimental project, but it would you have to use the UFO technology
to do it.
And it can resist the crushing gravitational force. That's not a problem. It's the heat.
Yeah.
If we could deflect the heat, we could send a probe using this technology, the slip wave technology, and we can get near enough to the core to maybe shoot radar beams out there in that area and see exactly what's there. And if there is a solid object there, which I strongly believe there is. And so it may be possible in the future to do that someday. But we haven't even gotten over the idea that anti-gravity exists yet. If you talk to your typical scientists, they'll scoff at you. Oh, that's science fiction. That's not possible. We got to get beyond that. Because
I know we do.
It's going to be possible, and we need that technology. We need it very much so.
Well, you know what? If you have that mindset, Mark, like that, you're not going to make any progress, brother. Because that's going to be holding you back. You just have to release and just push through.
They do. I love scientists dearly, but they're fairly rigid on a lot of these, and they would never consider, or many. Now I know scientists and physicists who believe in God and are religious.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say all physicists are not, atheists. That's not true.
Correct.
There are many that are not, but I will tell you, a lot of them are atheists, and the rest are agnostic. And so you got a bunch out there that really, hardcore against religion, against intelligent design, and all of that. And basically, what they're doing is shutting out the creator. The person that created all this, that created the laws of science that they're studying. and it just seems absurd to me that you would want to push off and, X out the very being that created all this. It's like Einstein said. He said that science without religion is lame. And
That's
religion
true.
without science is blind. So,
the thing I can tell you, Mark,
science needs religion.
Well, I can tell you this, Mark. I am a believer. I've always been a believer in my life, and I'll admit to you, I am a Christian. But regardless of what your beliefs are or your religious beliefs are, all you have to do is look up. Like I was just, I was outside the other week on a clear sky. I saw the whole universe, and it's like. It's almost like the story of the watchmaker, okay? What are the chances of the universe coming together so perfect that it makes an Apple Watch? You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen like that. Something created it. And a lot of these scientists that do believe, they can show you proof where science, because everybody thinks science and believing in a God don't work together, but that's actually not true.
No,
science and religion, or science and believing in a God, they do and they can coexist. And there's evidence that backs it up.
Yeah, I'll bring you evidence from that says exactly what you're saying. It's backing up what you're saying. It's coming from a near-death person, Father Rick Wendell, and he talks about this subject. Basically, he said when he was in the presence of God, God telling him this. So people need to listen to these NDE people because they're talking to the ultimate supreme being. And what Rick says happened to him is this. He says that God said this: all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws. They are immutable as God is immutable. None of this, what we see and experience, is an accident. It is intentioned by God.
Yeah.
I mean, that really basically says it. So, if we really want to have the deepest knowledge, the foundational understanding, we have to understand the Creator and, kind of listen to what he's saying. And he's telling people this story again and again. This is not the only person that's come back with that explanation or an explanation very similar to that. He's saying, you know what? Yeah, I did create the universe, not just the earth. The earth isn't the center of the universe. The sun isn't the center of the universe. But I will tell you this, the earth is at the center of God's attention. You are at the center of God's attention. Every human being on this earth is at the center of God's attention. Every atom everywhere in this universe is at the center of God's attention. So he not only created the universe, but he continues to co-create with the living beings that are in it as we participate in the evolution and the creation of this continuing creation of this universe in the physical form that it's in. It's a beautiful system. It was designed perfectly by a perfect being. And the sooner we can get to that, the more knowledge we're going to have, and we'll be able to advance greatly. I'm sure that these aliens know of God, and they know of him in a way that they basically a universal being.
Yeah.
And we in this planet, we're still arguing with each other, which religion is right. And this is all a matter of a misinterpretation of the religious texts that have been written, or in some cases modified, by man who has chosen to interpret things to his own advantage in some cases, and has gotten people divided, which we shouldn't. I mean, God is all about love, and that's the one main commandment that man should abide to, is just love one another. And if we can start working together and cooperating in this way, we'll advance quickly.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. And this goes really deep, and I'll let you go to where you think we should. But so I just want to go to near-death experiences really quick. I know quite a few individuals that had them. I know a couple atheists all their life, okay?
Right. Yes.
They had a near-death experience, and within a microsecond, transformed. Right. And what they revealed, it came down to one thing: love, complete love.
Right.
And what gets me is when it comes to UFOs and aliens, there have been people that said, well, if the government releases this information, it might change the world beliefs. Actually, I beg to differ. That actually would just enhance my belief, because God can do anything God wants to do. Anything.
Yeah.
And it's
God is it'll change their local view of God as being such just towards humans. It's like sort of thinking the world is flat, and then you finally sail out over the sea and you see it's round. And it's kind of like that expansion, and we need that expansion of mind, in the religious sense, to realize that God is a universal being. And all these religions, there's nothing wrong. They're just with them specifically, unless there is an interpretation that says, if you don't believe the way I do, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
That is not of God.
That is not of God.
Not of God. And that's a misinterpretation.
Exactly.
And deliberately put there to divide the people and control them. But, God is all about love and loving one another. And most of these religions help you have a personal relationship with God, which is what he wants. And I highly recommend, I don't care what religion you are, you just know it's about love, loving one another, and practice that religion, have that personal relationship with God, and things will get better. Not worse. They will get better.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So,
yeah, and I'm really familiar with. I've read a lot of NDEs, and I do like the stories, especially of the atheists that are converted.
Oh, it's amazing! And, it's absolutely amazing. Yeah. And they were telling me that, well, when you have a vivid dream at nighttime and you wake up and you had a dream, but it was so vivid, but you still know it was a dream, right? All these individuals tell me, no. Us living here, like you and I talking, this is the dream. This feels like the dream compared to there.
That's what I've heard. Yes, I've heard that too. I could confirm what you're saying. I've heard that many times, and that has impressed me greatly. Yeah, it's a personal experience. So all they can do is tell us through words, this is what I experienced, and it's more real. That place is more real than this place. And it makes sense because that place is eternal and this place is not. This is temporary.
Yeah.
You can't live physically forever. The earth doesn't live forever. Everything here is finite and temporary. Over there on that side, there's no time. Everything is eternal, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time. So to me, it makes sense that that's the real place, and this is some sort of an adventure thing that was cooked up so that we can experience suffering and difficulty, which are things that aren't really easily done, if at all, on the other side where everything's perfect and wonderful and everything of that nature. We can have difficulties here. We can have traumatic experiences that help us grow much faster than maybe we would grow on the other side. It's all about experience.
Yeah.
What experience? That's the only thing you can take with you when you go.
That's true.
You can't take your money. You can't take your gold, your silver, your fame and fortune, but you can take your experience, and that's what you give back to God when you return home.
That's absolutely right, because at the end of the day, all those material items don't mean a single thing. It's all about our experiences, what we learn, you name it. And that is important. Right. And I've noticed, I'm only 38 years old. I've gone through everything, I feel like. But as you get older, you start to realize that things start to come into perspective. And it's because, when you're young, you don't really think about that so much. Because you really don't.
You're right.
But as you get older, the important things come closer to you, and everything else, well, money and all that, that is important because that's how you survive. That comes off the top of the bucket list towards the end.
Right.
So I want to delve into one thing because I want to go into what I find very fascinating is your early experiences, early encounters when you were younger. But I had a question for you. This is always on my mind, and I want your take on this. So our universe, they say, is expanding like a balloon, but it's expanding faster than the speed of light. Do you have any theories or ideas what lie behind or outside of the universe? Like what is it expanding into? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yes.
It's a big question, I know.
Many thoughts on that, and there's different directions I can go. First of all, I like to correct the expanding universe theory that comes from Hubble. I don't want to get into too much detail here because it'll take too long, but I'm going to say the expanding universe theory is absolutely wrong. And here's why. Basically, I I was wondering about whether it's expanding or not myself. So I did some research, and I said, look, and some thinking. I said, look, I know the speed of light slows down when there's a gravitational field, when it goes through a gravitational field. So if the universe is expanding, since gravity goes out for infinity, there's so much gravitational field from all the planets and the black holes and that's added into space, and it's very weak, but it's still there for going out in all directions. If the universe is truly expanding, space is stretching, and even the physicists say that space is expanding. Well, if that's true, then the speed of light will increase. If, on the other hand, the universe is collapsing, then we will see that the speed of light is slowing down, because as the universe collapses, as black holes fall into other black holes and merge, and neutron stars merge and so forth, the overall gravitational field of this universe will increase until everything collapses together. And if that's happening, then the speed of light will be slowing down. And so I went out there looking for anybody that's noticed if the speed of light was speeding up or slowing down. I found Barry Setterfield. He was measuring. He took all the data from 1729 on and discovered that the speed of light is slowing down. So now, after reviewing that and saying and agreeing with his finding, so I now know that the speed of light is slowing down. That means the universe is collapsing. So how do we explain that these galaxies are way out there, far away from us, seem to be accelerating away from us? But there's a trick there. What's actually happening, acceleration is caused by gravity, not by some magical dark energy force that's never been proven, never been discovered, never been proven at all that space is expanding out there. What if those accelerating galaxies were actually falling towards something? So I started to look around. That explains why they're accelerating. They're just closer to something that they're being drawn toward. So I'm using a known force, gravity, we know exists, that's causing the accelerations of these galaxies that are far away from us. So I'm thinking they're falling into black holes.
Yeah.
So I go out and I research again and find astronomers that are saying they've mapped the whole universe, and you can see these pictures of it, with the microwave background and all that.
Yeah. And
sure enough, the Earth, the Milky Way, and Andromeda, and 100 or more other galaxies near us are not expanding and going away from each other. We're all coming together. And not only that, we're all moving towards something. And when we project out and look, we find that there's something out there that they've labeled, which is called the Great Attractor. Odds are it's a really big black hole. And our galaxy system, our Laniakea galaxy, I probably pronounced that wrong, Laniakea, it's a Hawaiian word.
Oh, it's all good.
It comes from it comes from the telescopes that are in Hawaii.
I don't want to cut you off. We just got back a few months ago from a 5-day trip in Hawaii. We were on Maui. And, everything's pronounced like that. And we went to the top of that mountain. We saw the observatory and all that, but I can't pronounce everything.
That's the place.
Yeah.
Laniakea.
Yep. Yeah. That's it.
Anyway, yeah, that place. They named our galaxy group after that. Well, that whole galaxy group is heading toward this thing called the Great Attractor, and we're accelerating toward it. We're all moving now over 1 million miles an hour toward it.
Wow.
And as we draw closer, the gravitational field is going to get stronger, and the speed of light is going to slow down some more. And basically, you could say the speed of light is a countdown timer. If it goes to 0, it's over. You're falling into the black hole. And fortunately, we're like 5 billion years away from that happening. So again, we got plenty of time. The sun will probably burn out first. No need to panic. But the evidence is that, all right, the universe is not expanding. So that's settled for now in my mind, and I talk about it much in the book. So now let's move on to what you wanted to know, which is what's outside of it, what's beyond our galaxy or beyond our whole universe. And again, I go to some near-death experiencers who, a lot of these guys do some very unique and interesting things. And this one that I read about, this fella wanted to see what was out there. And, you know, when you're on the other side, there is no time, and you can travel at the speed of thought. So in other words, you can travel at the speed of a god. So you just think and you're there. So this guy decides he wants to expand out, and he goes out beyond the galaxy, and you can see our galaxy is just this little ball of light. And then he decides, I want to go out beyond the whole universe. And now he's looking at the whole universe as just this round little sphere of, you know, bright lights. And you can see that there's other universes at massive distances from our universe. And they're just lined up going out in each direction forever. So there's this infinity of other universes and other dimensions that are going on. So that's what I think is out there, and it makes sense to me. Why? Because there's no reason why there shouldn't be. If there is one, then there can be many. If there can be many, then there can be infinite amounts. And that's what is coming back from people who have had near-death experiences and seen God create a universe, you know, with just a swish of his arm, and out comes another one. He's doing this all the time, infinitely, and from the past and into the future. You have to. It's very difficult to wrap your head around infinity, eternity, and what's capable of happening beyond this finite realm that we're in. We experience very little here, very minuscule amount of what's really out there. So, yeah, that's a deep question, and that's what I think is out there. There's just this infinite amount of universes that goes on forever, and it's all within God. It's very deep, heavy stuff.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you this, Mark. I actually agree with you on that. I believe the same thing. I believe it's infinite.
Yeah.
I really do. That's hard for us to comprehend.
Yes, it is. But that's a good thing to sit at the beach in the ocean and look up at the sky and ponder and, you know, where is this all coming from? Where is it going? You know, that's the kind of stuff I like to do when I'm at the beach. Just relax and think about this sort of stuff. And it takes my breath away sometimes, and sometimes I just have to stop and say, oh, it's too much for my little puny finite brain to comprehend. You know, it's just uncomfortable for the mind to try to understand infinity. But when you're on the other side, it's all easily comprehensible when you're connected back to the source. It's like everyone's connected there, and you're connected to God, and you can experience that and understand it. There's just the words just aren't available to describe infinity that well.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely right. We can't comprehend that at all. It's just, wow.
Not here. Not here. I mean, we can try, but, and come up with approximations, but it's,
amazing.
It's something that's much easier to understand in the other realm once you're back on the other side.
Yeah. Now, if I can ask you something, I want to go back to your early years, some encounters that you had, because this is also very fascinating. And I know some other individuals personally that had encounters such like yours, like Martha McKay,
right.
And all of them. Can you give us some backstory on that, on the encounters that you had? Because I find this very intriguing, personally.
Yeah, it's kind of runs parallel to this whole book and the creation of this book. It's all linked together. And Martha McKay, you know, when I was going to community college here in Polk County, And one of our professors was talking about this place called Casadega. And Casadega, we Floridians know as the North American spiritualist capital of North America. So there's a lot of psychics in this town. So this is back in the 70s, mid 70s, somewhere in there. And so I hear about this, and I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by UFOs. I'm fascinated by ghosts. I'm fascinated by what goes on in the other realm. I know I believe in another realm, the afterlife. And so I get together with my friends and we make a field trip. We go to Casadega, which is only about 45 miles or so from here. And we go there. On the way, we're going to go to Daytona Beach and, party for the rest of the weekend. This is back when I'm, around 20. And so we go there in 2 cars, and we go to Casadega, and it's an October day. And it's windy and cold and blustery. And we pull up, we park under this tree, and we're talking. And as we're talking, a tree branch breaks off the tree and falls on the other guy's car. So those guys would get scared and said, "We're getting out of here." And they left. So I just left me and this other guy. I says, I really want to get my fortune told. And, don't mean to be disrespectful to the psychics, but that's what we called it back in the day. And now they call it a reading, which is fine. And so we knocked on one place, and we saw them come to the window, but then they shuttered and didn't come to the door, and we tried another place. Eventually, we found this one cute little cottage, and this old lady lived there, and she let us in. And me and this guy named Duff, Jeff Jones is his name, we went in there. I went first, and then he went. And so I went in there, had my first reading, and everything she said came true. She didn't miss anything. And she told me about my future wife that I was going to have, and we were going to have 2 kids.
Wow.
And she told me about my future career, and she says, "I see you in wires. I see you surrounded by cables and wires. I don't know what this is. I don't recognize it. It's just strange. It looks like you're inside of a machine." And that actually did happen. One day, I went into the research lab, and I constructed all these tables with 2 tiers, and there was computers on all of them with all the cables dropping down all around me. And I surrounded myself with all these computers and cables. I was testing a lot of memory and computers, and all the machines were gutted, and all these things were running. And I looked around, and I said, "This is what she saw. This is all the wires coming down. I'm inside of this thing. This is what she saw." And it was, back in her time, this was before computers, when I went for this reading. So she was having a hard time understanding all this electronics, which all we had was just, in that time, was AM radios and stuff like that. There's nothing like this. And so everything she said came true. But it's what she didn't tell me personally that rocked my world the most. So when we got out of there, and then Jeff went, he had his reading, and then we got in our car, we went on to Daytona to meet up with the other guys, and we were talking, and then he says to me, "Well, I was really something about you, Mark." And I says, "What?" Because nothing unusual came up in my reading. It was just a nice reading. I got to hear about my future job and my future wife and all the kids. And she said, "Oh, someday you're going to make a great discovery. You're going to do something or write a book or something." I can't remember exactly what he said, but what I took away from it was I was going to invent something. So a lot of years I worked on inventions, trying to come up with something.
Yeah.
But that got in my head, and it never really left my head, but I didn't really know what it was. Time and time again after that, as I met other psychics along the way, they kept hinting at this thing, but wouldn't tell me what it was. So I had more and more confirmation, and I had more proof, evidence that they were actually talking to the other side. Some of these things were very dramatic. after Martha McKay, because there were several more that happened after that. And if you combine them all together, it makes a case for where I am right now. And this was what I was sent to do right now. This was the main purpose of me coming here, writing this book and bringing all this forward. And those encounters, some of which were with psychics, some were personal. I had my life saved at one point from my guardian angel, which was an incredibly powerful and dramatic experience. But, and I had it was a psychic thing that happened. And in that particular, and all of this really builds up evidence that there is an afterlife. There is a God. There are guardian angels. It's important for people to know this. It's important for people to understand that side is real.
Yeah.
It exists. It's important, and they're working with us. There is nobody on this planet that's alone.
Exactly.
Everybody has guardian angels. Everyone is being helped. You just got to learn to listen to them. And I'm one of the persons that needs to learn the most, because the day that they saved my life was the day I didn't listen to them. And after it was all over, I apologized, and to this day, I apologize to them right now. I know they're with me in this room, and they're laughing probably or whatever, but let me tell you what happened. I'm going home from IBM. I'm driving home, and I go this one of two ways every day. There's a crossroad. I go. There's a T intersection, and I can go left, the back roads, which are quiet, but it takes a little longer. It's a more peaceful route. Or I can go right, a lot of more traffic. It's a little shorter. Maybe I get home earlier, maybe not. And I decide most days I'm going to go left. So I'm pulling up to that T intersection, and I'm going to say, I'm going to go left today. And then when I think that, then I hear a voice in my left ear, and the voice says, don't go that way. And now I'm not talking, I hear a voice in my head. I'm talking, I hear coming through my ear a voice. So I quick turn around to see if there's somebody in the car. And there's nobody there. And I just shake my head, and I said, that didn't happen. And then I proceed, and then the voice says, don't go that way. And, I'm stopped at the intersection thinking, I got to make up my mind here. That somebody's, I'm not sure if this is real. Now I'm going to go that way because I got to know what I just experienced is real. So that means that there's going to be some kind of a wreck ahead. And why I would want to go. I mean, what was my thinking? I must have thought somehow I'm indestructible or something. But I had to know if what I just heard was real. So I went that way. And then I heard nothing more. I can imagine them cursing or whatever. What I got to do to tell this guy to save his life? So I went that way. So I'm looking ahead. So I'm saying, if something bad's going to happen, it's going to be a head-on collision. So I'm going to be looking ahead, making sure when I go through lights, I'll look both ways. But I'm going to look ahead. And so what I was doing, I'm behind this van trying to stay close for buffering. I'm behind this big van truck thing here, and it'll take the blow if there's something coming. But that didn't work. Yeah. It didn't work. None of that worked. Well, it did to an extent. Sure enough, I'm about 3/4 of the way home, and I see this truck ahead coming at us, the 2-lane road, and he's swerving wildly, going into our lane, going out, going off the road, coming back on the road, going into the other lane. And, all these cars are steering, off the road, going into ditches. And I'm saying, oh, my God, he's coming right at me. So I turn the wheel as hard as I can, and I go off into a ditch. Of course, the van did the same thing in front of me.
Yeah.
And then, we crashed into the ditch, and then that truck, it was a pickup truck, finally spins around in the middle of the road and stops, and it's laying sideways across the road. And we're all looking at each other saying, what the heck just happened here? And then I thought to myself, you fool. you were warned and ignored them. And, I went home and I told my wife, and I said, God, I got to pray. I got to pray for an apology because they, had to stretch the rules. I mean, let's face it, normally, your guardian angels aren't allowed to talk to you directly like that.
Correct.
Only if there's what they call an exit point coming that's not meant to be. That means an early exit point, a death. They're there to prevent that because you have to live through your life experience, your plan.
Yeah.
So they're there to help prevent that from happening. So, there's more evidence. There is an afterlife.
Yeah.
It's real. I know it from personal experience. I don't just believe in God anymore or an afterlife. I know for sure there is. And there's more evidence. I mean, I've got more rock solid evidence that there is an afterlife. And if I can give anything to you people that are listening to this tonight, is to know you're not alone. There is an afterlife. There is going to be a happy ending at some point when your time is up here. And don't be afraid. Live your life fully and experience as much good things as you can.
Well, that is absolutely true, Mark. Absolutely true. And I just want to tell our listeners, check out all of Mark's information in the description below, especially his website that we have also below. Also, on top of that, check out his book. I know I'm going to be getting it because going back to you, Mark, there is so much information that can be covered in an interview. And
right.
That's why I'm getting your book, because I know it goes deep, because that would take days and days just to discuss or probably touch the tip of all the information. But I really think our audience needs to check your stuff out, because I've started checking it out and I'm just blown away and completely fascinated by the research you've been doing. I'm just speechless, man.
Thank you.
I'm just speechless.
It is a lot, and it was a lot of work, and it was a surprise to me because when I started the book, I started it on the first day of my retirement.
Yeah.
I said, well, I need something to do after. I don't want to just sit home and watch TV. And so the first day of my retirement, which was January 2nd.
Well, congrats.
I started writing the book.
Because now you got time to research.
Yeah, I've got time. There's no excuse. I'm not tired now because I got all day. So I would write 3-4 hours a day and gave me something to do. And then when it was all over, I said, oh, it's a good book, I'll just put it up there, but I had these ideas of certain things I should do and not do about publishing and stuff, which then I had confirmed in another amazing psychic moment, really with a lady called Tamara Richardson. And that's going to be in my next book. So I'm telling you right now, there's going to be another book coming out. It's going to be a prequel. And it's going to primarily talk about my life coming forward and all these psychical things and all how they related, all these psychic experiences and medium experiences and the near-death research and all that led to the writing of this book and connecting all of the things that are in the book that I talk about. And there's a couple of chapters that I talk about an NDE that, a lady who oddly, it's one of the few NDE ladies I know that is not sure if there's a God.
Yeah.
Which made me very suspicious of what's going on. And I worked with them for a while in their group, and then that was really, I broke off when I found that out. And she was being influenced by scientist guys that were working with her.
No, that's probably why.
And, and she wanted to, call their favor and, have, a good thing going with them. So she let them kind of talk her out of it. It was just some sort of your brain running out of oxygen, that theory, all of that. And I says, I believe in you more than you believe in you. And I believe what you experienced was real and true. And it was a great, deep message that you were given. And so I talk about it in the book in detail. And we went our separate ways because she, was going to agree with these scientific guys who basically were agnostic as well. I had a feeling they were really atheists, but they didn't want to admit to being agnostic, or atheists.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's that newer book, the prequel, will be started on as soon as I finish my research paper and my PowerPoint presentation. And hopefully I do have a physicist lined up that I'm going to give this paper to review. He's an open-minded young fellow who does gravity research, which is perfect for me. I think he's out on the West Coast somewhere. But as soon as I can finish this paper up, which is taking me many weeks to do, I'm going to do that. And there's a new book coming out, and it will be a book that will answer a lot of these questions you have about how things got started and how things are connected and all of this. Because the important message to get out of all of this is intelligent design. God is real, and he's co-creating with me and you right now. You're doing important work. You're helping me get the message out there and helping people learn. And the stuff that you go on, the topics that you do on your show are of great interest and of great help for the people out there. They got to know there's more than just American Idol and, who's going to win the Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot more important stuff going on out there, and it's important work that you're doing, and I thank you for having me on the show to get the message out there. It's important for everybody to know.
Well, it's my honor, Mark, and if I could ask if you could hold for me for just a moment. And before we go, is there anything final you'd like to say to our audience? I forgot to mention that. I ask all the guests that in case anything was forgotten.
Well, I think I said it's mainly the bringing science and religion together. To join together is really coming from the same source. There is an intelligent design, and we should kind of just learn to relax and chill out and enjoy this life experience. It's eternal, it'll be this, and I firmly believe, and I'm very sure there's reincarnation. So there certainly is a lot more adventure to be had, even, after this one's over and moving forward. This is all part of the big plan. And that's what I would say, is to just enjoy your life and realize there is an afterlife and a God. And so I got that message out there.
Fantastic.
And there's so much more in the book. I can't even.
I know. I know.
I don't know which one to pick. The stellar converter. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
We could mention that because I don't normally mention that on the shows.
Well, you know what? What is the stellar converter? In a brief,
it's a class 3, as Mikio Kaku would say, device. It's a device that you could use to create other stars, but really I designed it to perpetuate the length of the universe's cycle, which we're collapsing, but I thought if there was a way to undo black holes, I can postpone the collapse. But and that's what the stellar converter does. It basically is a slip wave bias drive drone that penetrates the top of a black hole or a neutron star at the North Pole. It has to be done at the poles. And since it's an anti-gravity field, when the anti-gravity field contacts the neutronium material, it cuts through it like a hot knife through butter. And so you have to build it. It's a series of rings so that when it contacts at the North Pole, the neutrons come unglued from the surface and shoot up through this ring, through the magnetic fields, and come out of the rings, at the speed of light or slightly greater. And you could put one in at the North Pole and the South Pole, and you could basically bleed the neutron star, the black hole, of its mass.
Yeah.
Essentially, you can turn it back into a neutron cloud, which within 15 minutes turns back into hydrogen, and then you'll have more fuel to build stars again. So that's basically what the stellar converter device is.
Gotcha.
And if you look out at the far distant ends of the universe, you'll see things called quasars, and they look an awful lot like what I'm describing. They have said, the scientists say, there are intense magnetic fields at the poles. They're not sure how they got there. And there's extremely powerful beams of particles shooting out the top and the bottom of these quasars. So I'm saying, hey, maybe somebody else has already built one of those and is harvesting the stellar material to build new stars or galaxies or so forth. Or it could be a natural thing, but the whole mechanism is a bit more than I want to explain right now. It's basically magnetic fields coming around the neutron star caused by debris that's circling the neutron star in a very rapid, it's ionized particles rapidly rotating around the neutron star. That could explain it, but kind of like my theory better.
I know, so do I. Who knows? It actually makes more sense.
There's a fun little thing to talk about, but that's in the book. Just another invention, a nifty idea that maybe we'll do someday.
Wow. So that was Mark Fiorentino. And if you haven't, I would highly recommend you check out his website that is linked below. Also, his book, Master of Reality. But you can find all the information on his website, including all the other information as well. But man, these topics are fantastic, and Mark is a very phenomenal, very educated individual, and love talking to him. But until next time, I am Elijah, aka Mr. Cyber, for Mysterious Realms, and I am out.